Okay, so let's just put the cards on the table right at the start today.
Let's do it.
If I hand you a book, right, and it's titled Think and Grow Rich, published in 1938, what is your actual gut reaction? Because if you're cynical like me, you probably roll your eyes.
Oh, totally. I mean, it sounds like a late-night infomercial.
Right.
Just, sit on your couch, visualize a big pile of cash, and just wait for the universe to drop it right in your lap.
It sounds like absolute magic. Or a scam.
It absolutely sounds like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
The title itself is just so aggressive, it promises a massive amount. And honestly, I think that title has probably kept a lot of really rational, analytical people from ever even opening the cover.
Exactly. And that is exactly why we are doing this deep dive, because once you actually crack the spine, and specifically we're looking at Chapter 1 today, which is our main mission, you realize Napoleon Hill isn't talking about magic at all.
Not at all.
He's talking about what we would probably call today psychological engineering.
That's the perfect term for it. It's psychological engineering.
Mm.
Because this isn't about wishing for things. It's about the actual mechanics of the human mind.
Yeah.
Hill's central argument here is that the subconscious mind is basically a piece of machinery. You can program it.
Right.
And if you program it with a very specific type of fuel, what he calls this burning desire, it literally drives physical action in a way that mere hoping simply cannot do.
And before we get into the actual stories, because the stories are wild, we really have to establish the credibility of the data set here.
We do.
Because I think people assume this is just one guy's opinion that he thought up in his study.
Right. Hill didn't just, wake up one day and write a blog post. This book is the result of 25 years of research.
25 years?
Yeah. He interviewed over 500 of the wealthiest, most successful people in America at the time. We were talking about the actual titans who built the 20th century.
People like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford.
Thomas Edison,
Mm-hmm.
John D. Rockefeller.
The scale of it is staggering. And the origin story is just great because it starts with this sort of challenge. So a young Napoleon Hill is interviewing Andrew Carnegie, who at the time is the richest man in the world. And Carnegie basically tests him.
He does. He carelessly tosses a secret into Hill's mind.
I love that phrase from the source material. Carelessly tossed.
It implies that for Carnegie, this wasn't some huge mystical revelation. It was just how the world worked. It was obvious to him. But he wanted to know if this young reporter had the stamina to decode it.
Right. He asks him, are you willing to spend the next 20 years organizing this secret into a philosophy?
So that regular people don't have to learn through decades of failure.
Which is a completely wild request to make of a broke reporter. Hey, do you want to take on this 2-decade unpaid internship?
But Hill said yes, and the result is this book. Now, Chapter 1 is really the setup for the whole philosophy. It's the framework. And it starts by addressing this elusive secret.
The secret. Which, let me just say, is incredibly frustrating for a modern reader.
Oh, it makes you want to pull your hair out.
Because Hill never explicitly states it in one clear sentence. You're reading and thinking, just give me the bullet points.
He claims it is mentioned hundreds of times throughout the book,
Yeah.
but he flat out refuses to just write it down in a simple declarative way.
Why, I mean, from a psychological standpoint, why hide the ball like that?
It's intentional pedagogy.
Right.
Hill argues that for the secret to actually work, it cannot just be passive information.
Okay.
If I just tell you the sentence, it bounces right off your brain. You nod and move on. You have to be in a state of active reception. He says the secret comes in 2 parts. One part is in the book, but the other part is already in your own mind.
So if you aren't bringing that second half to the table, if you aren't ready, the book is essentially just blank pages to you?
Precisely. And he uses this metaphor that I think is really crucial here. He says when the secret appears to you, you must turn down a glass.
Turn down a glass. It sounds like a toast, but in context, it feels a lot heavier than that.
It marks a turning point. It's a decisive moment in your life. It's the exact moment you stop merely wishing for success and start actually demanding it.
Because he's very clear that there is no such thing as something for nothing.
No, the secret has a price. He says the price is far less than its actual value, but it absolutely cannot be had without intention. You have to be actively looking for it.
So let's look at what this intention looks like out in the real world. Because Chapter 1 is essentially a collection of case studies designed to prove his main thesis, which is that thoughts are things.
Yes, that thoughts, mixed with purpose and persistence, translate into material reality.
And the first story he tells, the primary exhibit of this chapter, is about a guy named Edwin C. Barnes.
This is the perfect case study. Because Barnes is kind of the anti-hero. When we first meet him, he is not a titan of industry at all.
No, he's basically described as a tramp. He's totally broke. He's wearing ragged clothes. And he has this completely insane idea. He says to himself, I am going to go into business with Thomas Edison.
And we really need to pause on the grammar there. He didn't want to work for Edison.
Right.
He wanted to work with him.
That is a massive distinction. I mean, most people in that era would be thrilled just to get a job sweeping the floors at Edison's laboratory.
Exactly. But Barnes wasn't looking for employment. He was looking for a partnership. And keep in mind, he didn't even know Edison.
He had no introduction.
None. He didn't even have money for a train ticket to get there. He had to hop a freight train, what they called traveling on the blind baggage, just to physically get to Orange, New Jersey.
So he finally shows up at the laboratory looking like a hobo, and somehow he actually gets a meeting with the great inventor. And Edison's observation of that meeting is just classic.
He really is. Edison later said, I didn't hire him because of his looks. His looks were definitely against him. I hired him because I saw something in his face.
He saw the expression of a man who was completely determined to stand by until he succeeded.
Edison saw that Barnes had staked his entire future on this single turn of the wheel. It was a consuming obsession.
But, and this is where the psychological engineering really kicks in, Barnes did not get the partnership that day.
No, he didn't. And this is the part of the story that all those get-rich-quick schemes totally skip over. Barnes got a broom.
He got a job doing menial labor.
At a nominal wage.
And he did that for years. Imagine having this burning desire to be the business partner of Thomas Edison, and your actual daily reality is sweeping the floor in the back office. Most people would have quit after a month.
They absolutely would have. They would have said, well, I tried, but Edison isn't noticing me, so I'll go find a sales job somewhere else.
But Hill argues that Barnes was using that time strategically.
Yes. Hill says she was displaying his merchandise. He wasn't just sweeping, he was studying. He was placing himself in the environment where his future partner could see his work ethic. He never saw himself as a janitor. He saw himself as a partner in waiting.
He was keeping that desire sharp. He refused to let the reality of the broom dull the vision of the partnership.
Right. And then the opportunity finally appears. But, as Hill warns us, opportunity is a real trickster. It rarely comes through the front door with a marching band.
No, it sneaks in the back door.
Often disguised as bad luck or temporary defeat.
And in this specific case, the disguise was a machine called the Ediphone.
The Edison dictating machine. It was this clunky new invention that Edison had just finished. And his regular sales course took one look at it and said, we can't sell this.
They thought it was a dog. They said it would require too much effort to educate the public.
They only saw a problem. But Barnes saw the vehicle.
Because he had been there, waiting, he was completely ready.
Exactly. Barnes knew he could sell it. He approached Edison and basically said, give me the chance. I can sell this machine. And Edison gave him the shot.
And he sold it so effectively that Edison gave him an exclusive national distribution contract.
Which birthed the famous slogan, made by Edison and installed by Barnes.
That business alliance made Barnes a very wealthy man. But Hill points out that the money is just the scoreboard. The real story is the mental architecture. Barnes literally thought himself into a partnership with the greatest inventor on Earth.
He had no technical training, he had no capital, no influence, he had nothing but a thought.
A thought mixed with what Hill calls definiteness of purpose.
And because he refused to retreat from that purpose, that invisible thought hardened into a physical reality. The money, the contract, the partnership, those were just the trailing indicators of his mindset.
It's incredibly inspiring. But Chapter 1 isn't just a victory lap. Hill balances the success story with a story of failure that, honestly, it makes my stomach hurt every time I read it.
Oh, you mean the story of 3 Feet from Gold?
Yes. The story of R.U. Darby and his uncle. It's a classic gold rush tragedy, and it perfectly illustrates the danger of quitting too soon.
So, Darby's uncle gets gold fever. He goes out to Colorado, stakes a claim, and goes to work with a pick and shovel. And let's be clear, this is brutal, back-breaking physical labor.
But they actually find the ore.
They find it. And the initial data suggests this is going to be one of the richest mines in all of Colorado.
So they cover up the mine, go back home to Maryland, and raise the capital from their relatives and neighbors to buy the heavy machinery they need.
They ship the machinery out, they drill, and they pull up the first car of ore. And it proves they have a massive strike on their hands.
They are mentally spending the millions. All they need is a few more cars of ore to clear their debts, and then they'll be swimming in profit.
But then the vein of gold just vanishes.
Just disappears like a phantom.
They drill on, desperately trying to pick up the trail again. They get more and more frantic. And finally, after weeks of finding absolutely dirt, they make a fatal decision.
They decide it's over. They quit.
This is the pivot point of the whole story. They sell all their expensive machinery to a local junk man for a few $100s, and they take the train back home in complete defeat.
But the junk man, he didn't operate on gold fever or emotion. He operated on data.
Right. He didn't just melt the metal down for scrap. He actually picked up the phone and called a mining engineer.
And what did the expert tell him?
The engineer came out, looked at the mine, ran some calculations, and said, the project failed because the previous owners were not familiar with fault lines.
Fault lines.
He calculated that the vein of gold would be found just exactly 3 feet from where the Darby family had stopped drilling.
3 feet. That is just agonizing to even think about.
It's gut-wrenching. Yeah. The junk man dug exactly 3 feet and pulled millions of dollars out of that mine, while the Darbys had walked away, completely broke.
So what is the actual takeaway for you listening to this? Is the lesson just never quit? Because honestly, sometimes quitting is the smart thing to do. If there's truly no gold, you shouldn't just blindly keep digging until you die.
That is a crucial nuance.
Yeah.
The lesson here isn't just blind persistence. The lesson is about the value of expert counsel.
Ah.
The Darbys failed because they relied solely on their own limited knowledge. They hit a wall and assumed not here meant not anywhere.
Right. They assumed their temporary defeat was a permanent failure.
But the junk man succeeded because he sought specialized knowledge before making a final decision.
So persistence really needs to be paired with intelligence and outside perspective.
Exactly. Hill points out that failure is a trickster with a keen sense of irony. It absolutely loves to trip you up when success is almost within reach. The 3 feet from goal story is a massive warning that your perception of failure might just be a mirage. You might literally be standing on top of the gold and not know it because you haven't consulted the right chart.
Now, Darby, the young guy who quit the mine, he actually redeems himself later in life.
He does. He went on to become a phenomenally successful life insurance salesman. And he told Hill that he owed his entire career to that lost gold mine.
He learned the lesson.
He told himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, so I will never stop asking just because someone says no when I ask them to buy insurance.
He took that devastating failure and turned it into his greatest asset. He realized that a no doesn't necessarily mean the end of the line.
Which perfectly transitions us to the third major story in this chapter. And honestly, this one is the most intense. It feels incredibly cinematic.
The 50-cent lesson.
Yes, it involves that same uncle, the one who quit the mine, and a 50-cent piece.
This story is wild because it strips away all the business context. We aren't talking about sales quotas or heavy machinery anymore. We are talking about raw, human power dynamics.
Set the scene for us.
So the uncle is back on his farm. He's running a mill. He's a harsh man, probably incredibly bitter after losing the mine. And the daughter of one of his tenant farmers, a young child, shows up at the door of the mill.
And she is terrified. She's visibly shaking. But she has been sent on a mission. Her mother needs 50 cents.
Which, in that era, for a sharecropper family, 50 cents is significant survival money. So she asks for it, and the uncle just screams at her to go home.
And she says, yes, sir. But she doesn't actually move. She stays planted right where she is.
The uncle goes back to work, looks up, sees her still there, and works himself into an absolute rage. He yells again. She still doesn't leave. Finally, he picks up a barrel stave, which is a heavy piece of wood, and starts marching toward her. It looks like he's actually going to beat this child.
It's a genuinely violent situation. In that moment, almost anyone, adult or child, would run. Flight instinct takes over. But this child does something extraordinary.
Sure.
As this furious adult is marching at her with a weapon, she steps forward.
She steps directly into the threat.
She looks him right in the eyes and screams at the absolute top of her lungs, my man, we've got to have that 50 cents.
And the uncle completely freezes.
He freezes, he drops a piece of wood, he reaches into his pocket, hands her the money, and then, and this is the key image Hill wants us to see, the uncle just sits down on the box and stares out the window in total awe. He realizes he has just been whipped.
By a child with absolutely no physical strength, no authority, and no social standing whatsoever.
Jill asks the reader, what strange power did that child use to conquer a fierce adult? She captured his mind.
But how did she do it?
Through absolute, unwavering intent. Hill connects this right back to the burning desire concept. That child had mentally cut off all sources of retreat. She was simply not leaving that mill without that money.
It wasn't just a wish.
No, her mind was so entirely fixed on that single outcome that it projected an energy that neutralized the physical threat of the uncle.
It's fascinating because usually when we talk about mindset today, we think of it as a purely internal experience, like I feel confident today. But Hill is describing mindset as a force that projects outward and actually dictates the behavior of the people around you.
Exactly. Her desire overpowered the uncle's will to resist. It's the exact same power Barnes used to get a meeting with Edison. It's the exact same power the Junkman used to see the gold that the Darbys couldn't see. It is the power of a human mind that has decided on a reality and absolutely refuses to accept any evidence to the contrary.
And this leads us right into the broader principles Hill lays out at the end of the chapter regarding what he calls success consciousness versus failure consciousness.
This brings us back to the psychological engineering aspect. Hill argues that our minds are easily magnetized by our dominant thoughts. If you are constantly thinking about poverty, failure, and impossible obstacles, you are magnetizing your mind with failure consciousness.
You're essentially programming the machine of your brain to go out and find failure.
And the machine is incredibly efficient. If you look for reasons why you can't do something, your brain will absolutely find them for you. Hill even mentions an anecdote where he bought a fancy dictionary and literally cut the word impossible out of it with a pair of scissors.
Which is a bit dramatic, sure.
It is dramatic, but the point stands.
The point is that successful people train themselves to focus entirely on the rules that do work. They don't ignore physical reality, but they refuse to let the concept of impossibility dominate their mental processing.
Because thoughts are things. He constantly compares this burning desire to invisible physical forces, like gravity.
That's a really helpful analogy for the skeptical listener.
He says, look, we don't fully comprehend gravity, but we all accept it and use it. We don't fully understand electricity, especially back in 1938, but we harness it to light our homes. He argues that desire is an intangible force that interacts with the physical world in a very similar way. You don't have to understand the metaphysics of it to pick up the tool and use it.
So as we look at Chapter 1 as a complete unit, what is the core mission statement here? Before a reader goes on to learn the specific 13 steps in the rest of the book, what foundational truth do they have to accept?
You have to accept that you are the master of your fate, specifically because you are the master of your own mind. You have to accept that the material stuff you want, the bank balance, the business contract, the gold mine, is just the final physical printout of the program that is already running in your head.
Right. Edwin Barnes didn't get rich just because he sold dictating machines.
No, he got rich because he had a thought. I will be partners with Thomas Edison, and he fiercely refused to let go of it, even when he was sweeping floors. The dictating machine was just the delivery vehicle. The gold mine was just the vehicle. The 50 cents was just the vehicle.
And this brings us full circle back to the Carnegie secret. The idea of being ready.
If you're listening to this deep dive right now and you think, well, that's a nice little story about a kid getting 50 cents from her mean uncle, then frankly, you might not be ready. You haven't turned down the glass yet.
But if you listen to that story and suddenly realize, wait, I've been quietly accepting a no in my own life when I should have been stepping forward.
Then you're starting to see the other half of the secret. You're recognizing that failure is very often just a trickster, testing the depth of your intent.
It's an incredibly empowering philosophy, but it also carries a heavy responsibility because
Yes.
it completely takes luck out of the equation.
It does. It removes your ability to play the victim. It says you are entirely responsible for the magnetizing of your own mind.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Chapter 1 of Think and Grow Rich, I want to leave you with a challenge directly based on the source material we covered today. We spent a lot of time talking about the family that stopped 3 feet from gold.
Easily the most cautionary tale in the entire book.
I want you to think about your own context right now. Is there a project, a major career goal, or even a relationship that you recently gave up on? Or maybe one you're just about to give up on because the vein of gold seems to have completely disappeared.
And ask yourself the really hard question. Did you stop because it was truly physically impossible? Or did you stop because you hit a fault line and just blindly assumed the gold was gone forever?
Maybe it's time to call in a mining engineer before you sell all your machinery to the junk man.
Or be like Barnes. Pick up the broom, do the work, and keep sweeping until the actual opportunity reveals itself.
Thanks for diving in with us today.
Keep thinking.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.